On this day, 12 months ago, Nigerians were queuing to cast their votes in the presidential elections. Though the ballot queues have gone, new queues of hunger, poverty, and economic anxiety are some of the concerns that President Bola Tinubu now faces. This week, the National Bureau of Statistics released the country's latest economic growth report. Now, the summary of the report is that the Nigerian economy is still growing, but slowly. What more do these economic statistics tell us about Nigeria's productivity and prosperity? Babajide Ogunsoro, founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's data analyst, is right here to share more insights. It's great to have you on the News at 10 again, Babajide.
Good evening, Ayotunde.
All right, so just before we go into the economic growth figures, of course, today marks it 1 year since the presidential election, or after the presidential election. Now, is there any statistics, measuring a public sentiment concerning that event?
There are statistics. There's a job approval rating for the president, which my firm, in partnership with other firms, are working on, and that report will be available before the next 12 weeks, 3 months, when the president will be 1 year in office. And in the president's job approval rating, which is like a proxy for public sentiment, it has some good news, some bad news, and some shocking news, and we'll be here on May 29 to look at the president's job approval rating in the last 12 months. But speaking of the economic growth figures, I would like us to take a look at what exactly and where we were in just about 3 decades ago, when it was the elections of 1993, Hope 1993. And in that election, Nigeria was in such a bad shape that Senator Tinubu was advising Chief Moshood Kashimawo Abiola that he should come to salvage Nigeria. This was in 1993. Senator Tinubu was advising the candidates. Now the president, we've seen, is having a tripartite meeting with all stakeholders, is now the one looking for advice. But Ayotunde, beyond what is in front of us, I'd like to talk about the significance of 1993 and how it compares to today. In 1993, Senator Tinubu thought things were so bad because then a bag of rice was 75 naira for this 5-kilogram bag. I remember in 1993, my mother would go to the market and would bring this similar bag, and she would complain, 75 naira for a 5-kilogram bag of rice in 1993. Now, it's important that you keep that information in your mind. 75 naira in 1993. Ayotunde, today, what will 75 naira get you? This is it. So, 1993, 75 naira gets you a bag of 5-kilogram rice. In 2024, here is the equivalent cost of raw rice, 75 naira per spoon.
A massive drop-off.
That is the situation we find ourselves today. Incomes are shrinking, productivity has dropped, and overall, despite the growth reported by the National Bureau of Statistics, yes, we're growing, but the growth shows that we are significantly and severely growing below potential.
All right, so Babajide, what is the situation with domestic food production? I mean, what are the facts, really?
Looking at the facts, it lets you, part of what I thought about, lets you understand why Nigerians are hungry and angry. Let's take a look at the facts on crop production. It allows us to understand the question which a lot of Nigerians are asking. Why is there so much hunger? And it's because the summary is we didn't focus on the numbers. Looking at what has happened since 2019, Ayotunde, look at our growth in crop production. In 2019, crop production growth, these are reports from the National Bureau of Statistics, not my numbers, 2.5% in 2019. Look at what happened in 2020 and 2021. A significant drop to 2.2, 2.3%. A further drop in 2022. Crop production grew by only 2%. And last year, our worst in recent history, crop production output growing by only 1.9%. So in summary, we are today not just because of the forex challenges and because of manufacturing concerns, we are today we are where we are with low food production because it has been a journey. We have been slipping, but we have failed to look ourselves in the eyes to say that these numbers were not healthy. So today's crop production situation and why prices are skyrocketing is because in the last half a decade, things have been getting worse. That is the summary.
So what does this report, I mean, what does it really tell us? Does it give any information on how much impact Nigeria has achieved, from the government in terms of private sector investments, of course, in agriculture, both government and private sector, that is?
We're at the situation where we need to tell ourselves the truth, Ayotunde. There's a phenomenon called the barber's chair syndrome, whereby the barber's chair keeps spinning, but it's not making any progress. A lot of motion, but no movement. And that is the situation in Nigeria's agriculture. These are not my facts. These are the facts from the National Bureau of Statistics, Ayotunde. Let's take a look at exactly how Nigeria's agriculture has been since independence, because it allows us to focus on the numbers, and the numbers speak to us. Look at what happened in 1960. Take a look at the information in front of you. It allows us to see that there really hasn't been anything that has been transforming Nigeria's agriculture. Independence, agriculture was about approximately 63% the size of the Nigerian economy. 20 years after, it was down to 20%. Ayotunde, 20 years after, still just about 20%. And 20 years after, still 24%. Based on the facts from the National Bureau of Statistics, agriculture still is at 23-24%. So the summary is, Ayotunde, in 4 decades, Nigeria's agricultural situation has pretty much been the same. There has been nothing transformational about Nigeria's agricultural sector. That is exactly what the numbers are telling us, whereby since 1980, agricultural's concentration of our economy has been the same, 20%. 20 years after, 20%. 20 years after, 20%. The report from this week, 20%. So all the investments from government and private sector hasn't achieved much. And that's because agriculture is a sector that employs most Nigerians. And if that sector isn't growing transformationally, then really nothing is happening.
Which brings to the question, I mean, what other critical sectors can actually assist in economic growth and development? Of course, you've talked about agriculture not getting the much attention. And, I mean, for a country where there are a large population like ours, over 200 million, what's going on? How do we get that solved?
So there are several ways we could look at it. One of the ways I like to look at it is to look at Nigeria's top 7 sectors, and that's because Nigeria's top 7 sectors accounts for 70% of the size of the economy. In this report by the National Bureau of Statistics, there are some good news, yet there are some bad news. And I would like us to take a look at these big 7, because that's really much what Nigeria is today. It allows us to look at how much the big 7 are growing compared to 2022. Look at crop production. In 2023, grew by 1.9%. Trade, 1.7% annual growth. But look at financial institutions growing by over 28% in the last 1 year. That is good news, but that information is also self-indicting, because financial institutions are growing by 28%, yet crop production, trade, food, beverages, and tobacco drinks are growing below potential. In simple terms, the good news is the financial institutions are growing. The bad news based on this report clearly shows that Nigeria's financial institutions are not helping other sectors to grow. And that is the sum of what we have in front of us.
So should we have any fears of another recession? Very quickly.
Clearly, based on the numbers, there's a lot of good news. There are no fears of recession. The summary is the Nigerian economy is resilient. It's growing. If we take a look at the numbers, the summary is our growth is just slow. And we're growing even slower than expected. So 2021, annual growth 3.4%. 2022, there was still growth, but slower than 2021. And last year, this report this week has shown that the Nigerian economy is still growing, but it's growing even slower than it did in 2022 and 2021. So the summary is no fears of a recession, but Ayotunde, sometimes there are things that are even worse than a recession. I'll share that with you in future.
We'll leave it at that. Babajide Ogunsanwo, thank you so much for your thoughts on the news.
The pleasure is all mine.